webinar, which will be on the Brand Love Index, which has been produced by Streetbees using our tool SBX. Today I'm joined by Satali, so welcome to you, who is LATAM Brand Insights Manager at Hershey's. How are you doing today, Satali?
Hi, how are you? Good morning for all of you. Well, here in Mexico, it's morning.
It's getting pretty late here in the UK, but we'll crack on. Great, so today we're going to be talking about what matters to consumers in 2025, and particularly trying to really unpick this idea of what is brand love or brand loyalty and how do they really intertwine together. So a lot of this is going to focus on that and those things, and we're really going to try and dig into how this landscape might be shifting for consumers, certainly in the last few years, and try and unpluck a bit what certain brands are doing particularly well in that space, in maintaining and growing that brand love, and what other brands could be doing to try and do the same. So we'll really try and explore some strategies that are and aren't working as we go. If you have any questions while you're listening to this, please do chuck them in the chat, and we'll try to leave some time for them at the end to come back to them. Right, we'll start with some housekeeping. What's the boring stuff? How do we get all this data? What is this study and where is it coming from? We've run this across two markets, so it's US and UK data only at the moment. We've got fairly robust age splits, nice nat rep fallouts there, and we've done it with a nice large sample of around 2,000 individuals. Now, in terms of how we actually capture this, jumping forward one step, we've been using Streetbees' new tool, SBX. So this is quite a cool new tool. It's been now on the market for about 18 months, maybe coming up on 2 years. And essentially what we've done is we've taken all the recent advances in AI, combined with our 10 years of experience trying to push conversational research, and we've tried to make the whole process of running market research as efficient and streamlined as possible. So in doing that, what we've done is we've essentially trained a bot to handle that whole agency side experience for our clients end to end. That means it falls nicely into kind of 3 neat buckets. First of all, we have a bot that will help you produce, refine, and ultimately submit a market research brief that essentially does all that hard research design for you and applies best-in-class principles to make sure you get the best results. Put good stuff in, get good stuff out is the idea. What then happens is the bot puts it through and launches live in our app. So we've got our own app at Streetbees, as some of you will know. It's live in 72 markets where we have built communities in these places. And essentially what that means is we can have one-to-one conversations with individuals via a sort of almost WhatsApp-style interface, but at huge scale. So having this bot do these interviews for us with its real-time probing means we can get to qual-level depth at quant scale. Lastly, what the bot does is takes all of that information, insight we've got together, packages it up in a nice dynamic report dashboard. So it's completely transparent. You have access to everything from the open text right through to the coded up and quantified data. And what the bot will do is even go the next step, and it tries to answer those specific questions from your brief. So we've really tried to take the pain out of market research and automate as much as possible. And that is SBX. There's my plug done. We'll get into the exciting stuff now. So what's coming up today? We're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to start off looking at, very nicely named, the anatomy of brand love. So what is it? What does it mean to people? When people think of brand love, particularly consumers, what are they saying? What does it mean to them to love a brand? Second, we're going to go on to keeping it real. So authenticity. What role does that play, and how do brands need to leverage that to really help build this brand love and make sure they connect with the right elements for consumers? Then we'll jump on to which brands are doing well in that, so who's winning that share of love at the moment. We'll pick a few key brand examples out and just talk about perhaps why or what they're doing well to create that brand love. And last but not least, we'll look at some more actionable ways and suggest strategies that brands can use going forward in 2025 and beyond to help build this brand love for them with their consumers. So that's what we're going to cover. Let's dive in. So starting off with the anatomy of brand love. If we jump forward one more slide, please. So we started very obviously by asking people what it is that they think defines brand love? What do they think of? What comes to mind? And what we saw is that things like loyalty come through quite a lot. When you ask people what it means to love a brand, they say, oh, I'm loyal to them, I care about them, I do these things, I stick to that brand. You've also got quite a large people saying that they understand it. So it's not just being loyal to it, it's feeling that I completely get what this brand is about, what it offers, what it can do for me, and almost what it stands for. We see coming through more and more over the years. Lastly, there's this kind of emotional connection that comes through. So these are the three big things we see. It's the idea that they'll be loyal to brands if they completely get them and feel that the brand also gets them. So that's where that emotional connection comes from. What we're seeing more and more is that actually brand love and loyalty is no longer just about passive appreciation. People are increasingly feeling more active in their advocacy of the brands they love. And that's something that brands really need to think about tapping into if they want to quite grow that brand love. I thought it'd be good at this point, Satali, I'm sure you'll have opinions on this, so perhaps you could talk to us a little bit about what you guys over at Hershey's think about brand love and what perhaps your approach to that is at the moment.
Well, the first thing that we have discovered is that brand love is very different within countries because as we have an international scope, you can evaluate how the US citizens love Hershey's, number one brand, and how Brazil or Mexicans think about Hershey's. So here in brand love, I think that international brands have to make an effort to really deliver a consistently message for all of them and understand what the needs and how the product perceived in each of the countries. You can't build a brand upon how large it is for a country, but you have also to tropicalize messages around across all the areas where you are sending your product.
Makes sense. I'm glad you mentioned consistency in there because that's a theme we'll be coming back to shortly. And interesting that you're thinking about that sort of localization aspect as well. So I guess that's a challenge for all brands. How do you square up, localizing your efforts at creating brand love while also making it as pragmatic for you to do at scale as a business? Food for thought there. So if we jump forward one slide, obviously we've only given you a little teaser here in terms of what's making up this data around consumers talking about brand love. As I alluded to earlier, our tool is all about this sort of rich, free-flowing conversation. And just to give you a snippet of what that looks like and what sits behind this data, you can see a couple of snippets from conversations here. So the bot's able to pivot and probe based on what people are saying in their own words. We then take that, and that's what gets quantified up into those big buckets of things like loyalty, understanding, experience, emotion, all of those things there. So we don't want to give too much away now, but if you join up and sign into one of our dashboards, you'll have access to all of this richness. What it means is you won't get left with high-level insight. You're able to go in and see that granular probing to make sure you've pulled out those interesting nuggets at scale. Now, we've talked about brand love. I guess the flip side of that, which we should cover, is brand hate. Something no brand manager probably wants to hear in relation to their brand. So in a similar vein, we've asked people what hating a brand means or what really disliking a brand means. And when you look at all that open text, there's some key themes that come out. Customer dissatisfaction is a huge bucket. And we'll dig into that in a second. People give a lot of different reasons, very specified as to why they might not like a brand or might really hate a brand. But when we look down at what the actual individual key drivers are, the largest individual ones are things like poor quality. Ultimately, if your product is not doing what people want or not meeting their needs, that's going to be the thing that causes hate. And often they won't find that out until they've already forked out some money for it. So it's a big one in terms of hitting brand reputation. Unethical practices, we were, I wouldn't say surprised, but surprised to see it being the next biggest one. It's an easy one for consumers to call out. We're seeing generation on generation, people tend to be caring more about the whole supply chain and ecosystem that their products are coming from. So that emphasis on brands to really be both transparent about that and doing a good job is becoming more and more important. While it might not make people necessarily buy it, doing these things or not doing them can certainly avoid a brand being hated. And lastly, we see costs coming through. That's the same old thing. I always hate the brands that I can't afford. Doesn't mean if I love them or not, just something that we're never going to get away from. So I said I'd dig a little bit into customer dissatisfaction. It's a large bucket. If we jump forward one, we'll see there's a lot of key themes that come out of this. And you've got a few examples here. Clearly, when you ask people what they hate about a brand, they can give you a lot of rich detail. You don't have to do a huge amount of probing. People will just start talking. But the key things we see coming through within that bucket are things like perceived lack of value. So it's thinking it was okay, but not compared to the amount I've paid for it. There's more specific things around customer service, so complaint resolution, and then often those people bundle up with feelings of helplessness or betrayal, where they can't quite get the service or product they're expected, or can't quite get the help and aftercare they're expecting. So there's a lot of things bundled in under there that can really lead to dissatisfaction. Moving swiftly on. So our next section, we're going to look at keeping it real. So this is around authenticity. We'll jump forward one more. We found over the last couple of years an interesting trend where we're seeing actually that more and more people are saying celebrity endorsements are having less impact on them. So these large influencer partnerships are perhaps not all they were once cracked up to be. People tend to see through it. They tend to see that actually you're just being paid to do that. There's no actual brand love there. And it tends to be much less impactful because of that. So we're seeing huge amounts of people saying, actually, it's not having an impact on me at all there. Instead of that, we're seeing more things. So on the rise, flip side of that, we've got people talking about ethical practice and people prioritizing things like sustainability efforts. It's this idea of conscious consumerism starting to come through, and people care about it more and more, even if maybe it hasn't yet translated across that say-do gap into direct action. It's certainly something that's on consumers' minds. The last thing here that we see coming through in 2025 is the importance of customer experience. So again, this is actually perhaps needs a bit of unpacking. They're talking about real experience. So in linking back to this influencer idea, they don't want to see this manufactured endorsement. People are wanting now more and more brands to promote their authentic customer experience, however that may be. It could be that instead of paying Kevin Bacon to go and talk about mobile signal for months and months, you can actually get people who have experienced great things talking about it and giving those real-time reviews. So it all links back in with the power of the review, which we've been seeing grow year on year as well. Now, Sitalia, it'd be great to hear your view. I know this study's focused primarily on UK and US, but is there any big differences you'd see here to what you're seeing across your LATAM markets?
Yes, I will be talking about the Mexican case. Many companies shift from open TV to paid TV or to social media in the last 5 years. They switched their budgets. But what have we seen are two things. The first thing is that maybe because of the socioeconomical level, half of the country are not into social media. So open TV or traditional ways to get to them are becoming more relevant 5 years later. And the other thing is that we compete, for example, in 2013, 2014, we compete with a little amount of manufacturers in open TV. And now in social media, we compete with all manufacturers, even if they are huge companies or little companies, all are in social media. And to go through the clutter, it has been very difficult. I think that's why consumers no longer take into account influencers or celebrities, because all are talking about many different brands and you can't focus. I think that, yes, as companies, we have to take into account the communication on social media, but also the traditional channels.
Makes sense. So those traditional channels you're seeing as having, more cut through, perhaps because there's just less people competing in the space. It's less crowded field. Whereas social media is so democratized, it probably works great for those smaller brands. But if you're a bigger one, suddenly you're in a much more crowded field than perhaps you were used to.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. I thought it was interesting your point around, perhaps Mexico or Latam being sort of a few years behind in terms of moving to this social media thing. Do you think with those markets, you'll follow the same pattern and trend that's happened elsewhere? Or will you kind of try and jump a stage or skip a few things out and get to, maybe get ahead as a brand, doing the things that perhaps will come in 5 years' time?
I think that we are moving slowly and getting back to the basics, but very slowly, because it's still, social media has a very relevant role in every country. But we are returning to the basics. That's the message. We are turning our heads around and finding ways to go through the clutter and to take and to reach the attention of the public, because it has been very hard with TikTok, for example, or Instagram. It's harder each day to to really reach the attention of the public, because it's also fast, that you have only 10 seconds, 15 seconds to deliver the message, and the message is not really getting into the ones that we want to attend.
Makes sense. So perhaps something to be said for the more traditional methods of doing that.
Yeah.
So jumping forward, something interesting that we've seen coming more and more, something I certainly hadn't heard of until recently, is de-influencing. So rather than people going on and promoting products or brands, whatever it is, it's actually people giving these kind of scathing reviews of products they've had, which makes it very gritty, very authentic. It feels kind of like an extension of almost cancel culture to me, where people are going, oh, I had a terrible experience with this, I should share it so other people know. So we're starting to see the power of this kind of TikTok style review really amping up for people. And given the viral nature of things like this, if you get a particularly well elucidated or amusing review, perhaps, that could be quite damaging to brands going forward. So definitely something to watch out for is this de-influencing trend, to try and get ahead of it. I guess the upshot of that is, to avoid it, we've got to really think about making sure that we're always providing that high quality customer experience, both from a product and service, end to end, to avoid this from happening. So next up, we're going to be talking about brands that have been successful in doing this. We're going to focus, obviously it's a huge amount of brands we could have covered. We've really narrowed this down to lifestyle and household brands just for ease today. So if we jump forward, we'll start with the lifestyle brands. Some popular names here, perhaps no surprises. When you ask people, what's your most loved brand or top of mind loved brands, you get people like Nike coming through, Samsung and Apple. So the kind of big players, ones you'd expect. I found this a bit disappointing, to be honest. I thought, with the rise in people saying that they want to see brands that share their values and brands that are doing good things, like be it for the environment, be it for health, be it for whatever else it is, I thought we might see a few more mission-led brands like your Patagonia coming through there. But clearly they've not quite got the reach yet, so these big ones are still sitting there. The reasons people are citing for saying that they love these brands so much are perhaps unsurprising. It's things like quality, affordable pricing, and durable products. Now, while this may seem very kind of obvious on the surface, I think there's a real nice tension here to point out. Pricing is something that we see as market researchers and insight managers, comes up all the time. But I think it's always important to make clear, particularly in relation to brand love, that actually pricing is always a value equation. So here they're seeing it about affordable for the amount of quality and the durability of products they're getting here. It's about value for money, not about being cheaper. And that's why we've got these brands here that definitely are not the cheapest, but they're seen as having this sort of high levels of love in there. Jumping forward to the household brands, ones that came out here were Coca-Cola, Dove, and Heineken being the top brands. Slightly more spread here, lower percentages. There's not as clear winners in this one. We see appealing taste come through. I'm going to go out on a wild limb and suggest that is just for the food brands like Coca-Cola and Heineken. I don't think anyone is saying that Dove tastes particularly good, whether eaten or breathed in, but it is still in there. Again, we're seeing this kind of idea of quality coming through, that affordability and brand trust in here. It's really sort of coming to the fore. Particularly interesting, this is happening this week. I was pleased to see Coca-Cola at the top, given I was reading not just yesterday that they're recalling a load of products for fears that there might be harmful chemicals in them. I guess maybe that is a sign of trust, in that they didn't just keep quiet about it and leave them loose. They are pulling them back. So there's interesting ramifications for trust. So on to kind of lessons from these most loved brands. What is it that they're doing, and how can we learn from them? If we jump forward one more. So I see the kind of top lifestyle brands are doing lots of different things, and there's a number of ways that they're sort of engaging better and being seen by their consumers to be doing good things. A great example is Nike's development of its Flyknit technology. I'm told this revolutionized the footwear manufacturing process while also reducing waste and still delivering that high quality. I think it's a really important thing to note that while consumers have very high, often very lofty values around what they want from brands, what they expect, they're still very rarely willing to forfeit or compromise on any of the things that are more important to them. So this aspect of quality, durability, value for money, they want all of those things and they want those values. They're not willing to drop off on quality just to get something that is more perhaps eco-friendly or less waste. So I think Nike did a really good job there. Equally, talking about kind of quality and how we do this, Apple, the way they integrate sort of hardware and software into one seamless ecosystem, is really about translating quality into everyday convenience. So you start to see these weird overlaps where people are talking about quality, but they actually mean things completely different, like durability, convenience, or ethicalness. That same thing bundled in together. We're seeing a blurring of the lines there in terms of what people mean. The durability one is particularly interesting, and actually it manifests itself in quite unexpected ways. So we did a bit of digging into the open text we got around Samsung, and we found that when people are talking about its durability, it's nothing to do with foldable phones, which we know had lots of problems with durability. It's more around the way that they're willing to build a long-term software support programs and trade-in programs. The idea being that it's not just about the individual device I have, about the long-term service, upgrade, trade-in I can get with that. So it's about engaging with the brand rather than just with that one iteration of the product. And I think this is really going to be a key thing for demonstrating durability in the modern age, particularly, I'm going to say, for tech brands, perhaps more than your FMCG brands. But we shall see. We've also seen that pricing strategies become more sophisticated. So all three of these brands have done an amazing job of making premium prices feel like value investments for their customers. So when Apple supports, your iPhone with years and years of updates guaranteed, or when Nike's performance wear becomes kind of a wardrobe staple in the kind of athleisure market, you're sort of expanding their value proposition and really further justifying to consumers why it was worth spending and forking out that slightly higher, more premium price up front. And the fact they're getting that experience really loops right back to that value being to do with brand love. Looking at the home sector, if we jump forward one slide, you see a couple of brands doing really well, being called out consistently here are Dove and Heineken. These are both brands that are succeeding in coming across as more than just their products. So they're kind of building love by doing quite key initiatives that also don't stray too far from their heartland. So Dove, for example, are really leaning into this authenticity piece, but coming from that place of care and trust. They've got campaigns around real beauty or making beauty a positive experience for everyone, which really kind of links nicely to their heartland in care and trust, but also is showing that they do stand for something. Consumers are seeing this and it's coming across as very authentic rather than being something that they're just doing to try and sell more stuff. Heineken equally done a great idea of their campaign around building bridges, different beer moments where you're pulling together people with perhaps polar opposite ideas can still bond and connect in that moment of having a beer together. That's a nice graphic there showing those bridges around the world. So our last section, the affection formula we've called this. How does a brand go about building brand love? So we're going to try and give you some tips here on how this can happen. Before we do that, Tatali, perhaps you'd like to tell us a bit about what you guys at Hershey's are prioritizing when it comes to building brand love.
Well, you have touched a couple of points that are important to build brand love. For example, value for money. It's not about having the cheapest brand in the market. It's about working with consumers so they can understand that quality and availability are have a cost, and to understand that they are willing to pay that cost for your brand. And you as a brand manager or an insight manager have to measure how much does your cost or your price differs from national inflation. For example, we have seen that we can't price our brand above 4 or 5 points from inflation. And in that case, we have to do it because of cost. For example, cocoa cost, of sugar cost, we have to work a lot in communicating the value of the brand. I think the name of the game is it's building equity, and that's how you um, you also build brand love, because you reflect on your product, on the quality, and on your prices, that you really understand what's the consumer or the shopper uh, thinking about the budget. You are how do you say, you are understanding how they are locating the budget, and you are flexible enough to understand the equation and fit with products or innovations, so that the budget they are given to you, the 10% they spend on confections, for example, in Mexico, really um, really guaranteed quality and a good brand.
I see. I know with that in mind, brands' pricing strategies and how you're getting around perhaps higher costs of things. Shrinkflation is obviously a big topic, particularly here in the UK. Is that something that, has Hershey's ever thought about their size of product? Is that something you guys would consider changing or bringing down to maintain price, or putting up?
What we are considering, for example, is that cocoa has been raising costs a lot. We are not translating that cost to consumer at a full stage. We are thinking in a 5-year context, and we are trying to understand how much can we price above inflation, so consumers don't reject the product.
That's interesting. So if I understood you right, you're thinking as a brand, maybe you sort of take the hit a little bit on the part of the consumers now, on the assumption that that maintains that brand loyalty and usage, so that when prices do come back down again, you haven't lost those consumers, and they feel like you've done them almost a solid there by maintaining that affordability for them. That's interesting.
Yes, and also working a lot in the equity of the brand. So it's a balance between what it costs and what it delivers.
Of course. I wonder if more brands will be taking that almost long-term, I was going to say altruistic, but I guess it's not quite that far, but certainly a long-term view to keeping customers happy in their experience versus, profits now. It's an interesting one for brands to be weighing up.
Yes, it's very interesting. And also, you also talk about, we have to talk about the environment. For example, you talk about ethical matters. And I have a very nice example of what's happening, for example, for Target and Walmart in the USA, as they withdrew the inclusion their inclusion programs, and how consumers are reacting to them. That's very critical. You have to be sensitive of what's happening in each country also.
Indeed. Great. Well, I think let's dive into some of our strategies from this study then. So first of all, perhaps one, not the most exciting thing, but I think there's more to it than meets the eye. There's this idea that quality never compromises. So what does this mean? This is about going, just because you're a brand and you've got a great product, that can't just be it. You need to provide a great service at every single consumer touch point, from the moment they're buying it to if they have to return something. You want that to be equally seamless and equally delightful, at whatever end that is. Now, something we saw come through here, and perhaps it signifies a tipping point. For years, I think you'd see in surveys around customer satisfaction, you get people going, oh, I hate when I try and ring up or get something done from customer service, and I end up talking to, it's a chatbot or it's a form I have to fill out and I can't speak to anyone. Now, I think this was a problem for ages, but over the last couple of years, with the advent of these amazing AI chatbots, I think what we're starting to see is a tipping point, whereby now we have people going on and engaging with brands that have excellent customer support run by an AI, and having amazing experiences, sometimes better experiences than perhaps they would have had waiting for a human in a call center to take that part. So I think that's something that brands are going to have to start thinking about. Maybe they need to modernize and update their sort of consumer feedback process so that they can really integrate these AIs and get the benefits from them. Jumping forward, the next thing we see is, obviously we've talked about this a little bit, we're saying goodbye to influence and hello to authenticity. So we've said, big bold statement there, the era of superficial influence is over. Lots of consumers are seeing celebrity endorsements as unimportant, even the influence one, which was, I guess, the step down to more authenticity from the original TV celeb ad type campaigns. Now we've gone even beyond that, and they're going, we don't want to see paid influencers. We want brands instead to focus on amplifying these authentic voices. So it's the idea of, when you go on Amazon, you can see those real video reviews of people talking about how much they liked it. That is seen as imminently more powerful in that individual sales moment than having seen some influencer or celeb talking about or using the product, when people can clearly see those are paid brand partnerships. So this idea of using user-generated content, this TikTok style thing where you can bring that to life and very quickly have mass opinion showed in an authentic way via these video clips, is something that's going to be very powerful and very important for brands if they want to be loved in 2025 and beyond. Next up, we have 2 points here. So we've got value beyond price tag. This is about demonstrating a long-term benefit. So we talked about durability earlier and kind of sustained performance, but it's really about showing that actually you can up the value perception of something, not necessarily by changing that product at all, but by about changing what they do at the end of life, how they feel that they can deal with it, and how they're supported, particularly in the sort of tech and services space, but also in the more hard product space. So this could be things like having bring-back schemes, money off on your next one, something to make you feel like you're getting longer-term value out of that initial purchase rather than it just being buy, use, discard. Number fourth strategy we've got is making responsibility irresistible. Now, I personally love this one because something we all know but rarely talk about is that most consumers, I should say, care deeply about things like the environment or sustainability or conscientious consumerism. But we know deep down in our hearts we're all really lazy. So when it comes to actually making those choices, am I going to read the back of the pack? Am I going to look at the supply chain for this and find out where it was made, how it was made, all the steps in that? No, realistically, I'm not. So the onus is on brands. If they want to be loved and seen as doing this well, they've got to be putting the effort in to make sure consumers don't have to put the effort in. So it's about making those responsible choices as effort-free for people as it would be not to care about it at all. If we jump forward one, last but not least, we've got customer-centric always. So really putting the customer at the heart of everything you do. The idea is here that rather than building lists of people we consider to be our customers or clients, we should be thinking about building and fostering dialogue and trying to make people feel like we're addressing more of a community. If you can build a community around your brand rather than just a customer base, you will already be going a huge way to creating that brand love and fostering that long-term engagement. Talia, I don't know if you wanted to jump in at this point. Is there anything you think Hershey's is leading the way on in terms of being consumer-centric?
Yes. As I told you, we have to think not only about how, for example, our categories are consumed, but also about the whole household budget and the whole culture environment, for example. And I think that's the way to be really consumer centric, not only focused on the experience of the product, but also focused on understanding how's the environment going, how purchasing power it's increasing or decreasing, and adapting to that, to what's happening in the countries with innovation, with new products, with new formulas, for example, but taking into account the shopper and the consumer in the center.
Of course. So if it's more still around that sort of pricing piece, affordability, matching what you're offering to their life and needs.
Yes.
Great. And I don't know, how are you making sure you're on top of that? What ways are you kind of ensuring you reach that parity level?
For example, we, as I told you before, we have a really good tracking on how inflation it's going and the difference between inflation and our prices, not to break into a non-return point, for example. Mm-hmm. And also we are tracking equity of our brands, trying to raise it so we don't have problems with price increases.
Makes sense. Great. So jumping forward, to sum up even and recap, we don't believe in dragging things out at the Street Bees, so we're keeping this webinar nice, short and sweet. It's kind of 5 key points to take away, and that is that consistent quality across touch points is hugely important to brand love. If we don't have that, you're going to cock it up at one point along the way, and one bad experience is enough to really turn someone off of a brand and lose that love and trust. Secondly, we've got manufacturer endorsement needs to be out the window, and amplification of real voices is probably going to be the song of 2025 and beyond. Thirdly, we need to position our products as investment, so focusing on creating this idea of long-term value, even if the product itself is not necessarily meant to be a long-term thing. And the last two being, one, if you're going to have values, you've got to be authentic to them and make them as easy as possible for consumers to understand, engage with, and believe you when you do that. And last but not least is that point we just made around treating consumers like a community member, not just someone who's going to buy your product from a customer list.
Perspective, yes.
So that's kind of our findings for today. Just to recap a bit about how we found this and how our methodology works. Obviously, we lean heavily into things like video, open text, and in the moment to get this. So we're trying to really leverage everything done in consumers' own words. So it's trying to be as qualitative as possible while still maintaining these large quantitative scales so that you can have that robustness and peace of mind while also making sure you get those sort of gold nuggets in the insights going forwards. Thank you for joining our session today, and thank you to our guest speaker, Satali. It's been a pleasure to have you. If you have any questions, now's the time to share them. Before I answer questions, though, I will just say our white paper on brand love has been published today. If you'd like to read that, please head over to the StreetBees website, so the SBX website, and you'll find that there. Now, are there any questions? Yes, I'm seeing lots of questions around. Will we receive the full report? Yes, that will be sent out afterwards in the link. And I think there's a few of those. Great, I think that's it for questions. So we are off the hook at this point. Satali, thank you again for joining us, and everyone have a lovely day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.